Didn't see you there. I hear you want a 650cc naked torquey bike with a V-twin and a little bit of panache. Come with me, I think I've got just the thing for you.
Before we get started with today's video, I did want to shout out a longtime partner of ours, Ridge Wallets. If you guys have been around the block, you know what it is. Ridge makes these badass minimal wallets that are made out of materials like aluminum, titanium, carbon fiber, and more. I've had mine for damn near 2 years now, and it's basically indestructible. Hell, Spite even ran over his with his Harley to see how it would fare, and it was totally fine. The wallet can hold 12 cards in his room for cash. There's over 30 colors and styles, so there's bound to be something you're gonna love. The wallet also comes with a lifetime warranty, and because Ridge is a cool company, you can buy it and try it for 45 days. If you don't love it, send it back for a full refund. Not convinced yet? They also have 30,000 5-star reviews. That's a lot of wallets sold, my dudes. Right now, use the code Yammie Noob at checkout to get yourself 10% off and free shipping. I guarantee you there's a Ridge wallet for you, so use the link down below and the code Yammie Noob for 10% off and get started.
So in the world of naked bikes, you've probably heard a lot about these two motorcycles we have today. It's the Suzuki SV650 and the Ducati Monster. Why do we have the Monster? Well, I'm gonna let Spite tell you about that a little bit later, but the reason we have the SV650 is because this is our giveaway motorcycle. We've got tons of giveaway bikes up for grabs this time. We've got a Suzuki SV650, a Husqvarna Sparkpillen 401, a Yamaha MT-03, and 2 Groms. So hit the link down below and check out how you can win one of these motorcycles for free. But if you don't know anything about this motorcycle, let's walk through it a little bit. So the 650cc class is a great starting point for people who are maybe past their A2 license phase or those who are a little bit older trying to get into the sport of motorcycling. They got plenty of power, they're tons of fun, easy to ride and easy to own, and the SV650 is one of my favorites. This motorcycle is powered by a 645cc V-twin engine. It's liquid cooled, dual overhead cam, and is about as modern as you can get. It makes 75 horsepower and 47 foot-pounds of torque. So the more astute viewers among you might have noticed that we're calling this a naked bike, but you're saying, yeah, it's got these clip-ons right here. Well, that's because this is the X version of the Suzuki SV650. What that means is you get clip-ons, a little cowl, and a nicer seat right here. But that's gonna bring the price up to this bike to $83.99 MSRP, so it's a little bit more expensive than the normal bare-bones Suzuki SV650, but it's the same frame, same engine, same chassis, same everything, basically from here on down. This motorcycle features a pretty awesome suspension package from the factory. It's nice and stiff. It's non-adjustable except for preload in the front and the rear, but it feels pretty good going down the road. I think one of the best things about this motorcycle is that it's approachable for a beginner, yet fun enough for an intermediate to more experienced rider to have fun with it as well. It really does encompass a great package, but we would be remiss to not compare it to something that is pretty much the same thing because Suzuki kind of copied Ducati's homework on this motorcycle back in the 90s. So I'm gonna kick it over to Spite and he's gonna tell you about this Ducati Monster.
So, like Yam said, this is a bike that I got on Twisted Road. It is a 2012 696 Ducati Monster. It is a 696cc engine, as the name would imply, and it is air-cooled, meaning no radiator, and it has a little bit more boost tolerance in the engine. It has desmodromic valves in there, which means that it is a little bit more expensive when you go to service it, but you know, that's just how Ducati boys roll. It is basically the bike that Suzuki copied from 1993, just upgraded and modernized a little bit. You'll notice it's got these big dual disc Stonkin Brembo brakes up front. We've got our twin undertail exhaust. It's very Ducati. It's got a very muscly vibe to it. And honestly, for $4,500 roundabout used, this is a great starting point. If you want to get a new modern Ducati Monster, you're looking at about $10,000, maybe $11,500 out the door for the 797. So now to wrap this little section up here, everybody loves horsepower and torque figures. This makes 79 horsepower and about 51 foot-pounds of torque. It is a little bit quicker than the SV650, but honestly, they're basically the same. And again, I did get this bike on Twisted Road, so if you want to go rent a bike for a day, click that link down below and get yourself a free day of riding. So I feel like we've talked enough about these bikes here in the shop. Let's go get them out on the road and see how they feel back to back.
Alrighty, Spite. So we have now discussed in the garage the pros and cons and benefits and actually how similar these two bikes are, and we have to ride them now.
Yes. And I think one thing that has surprised me on the ride out is just how there's a dual nature to the Monster's engine. It's very mellow below 6,000 RPM, but you get it up north of 6 grand, and it's like party time.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how it feels since I do have a lot of experience with air-cooled Ducati engines. That's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, the fueling's really nice on it. Yeah, so immediately the thing I feel just pulling away from a dead stop is these older Ducatis. I mean, this is 2012, so it's about 8 years old at this point already, so it's really getting up there.
Yep.
These old air-cooled ducks, they just have such a raw nature to them, man.
It is a very, old school feel and still kind of a new school frame. It's every bit as performance oriented, but it has just that, kind of, again, raw is the best way to describe it. It's got that raw character.
Now the flick-in is very different for these two bikes. I think it's because this bike's geometry is a little bit different than the SVs. We're on a pretty street bias tire here with the Angel GTs on this rented Monster, so the flick-in does feel a little bit slower, not quite as sporty as the SV. What do you think?
Yeah, and you know what? One of the things that still surprises me about flicking this SV in is how good these clip-ons make that flick-in feel. Your weight feels like it's in a good spot. It's really easy to lean off this motorcycle, and it just kind of dives right into a corner for you. And I do like the SV's engine, but there's just something about that air-cooled Ducati single overhead cam Desmo system. It's so good.
Yeah, it's funny because you, as a guy who likes Harley engines, I knew you'd really dig the Ducatis here. These older engines, they're really special.
Whereas this feels, I'm not going to call it clinical because it still has a lot of fun in it. It's not like a BMW. It's just not as, it doesn't have as much character.
Yeah. The SV's engine feels really pulled together, it feels like it's really tightly built, whereas the Ducati feels a little bit looser,
Well, that's down to it still being air-cooled over liquid-cooled. When you have an air-cooled engine, there's inherently more tolerance in the engine, which makes it make a little bit more noise and makes it just feel different.
Yeah. Big difference for me as well are these Brembos. This feels very, very different than the SV. Oh, suspension check right there. Yeah, but the Duck is pretty rewarding to ride. I think the only thing I would do to it would be to get a bit sportier tire. I don't love the Angel GTs, but I think that would really fix it up quite a bit, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very sporting motorcycle, and I think that's why it's really nice that we're actually comparing it against the SV650X, because the X is the, say, more sporting version of the SV650, and I can really feel the difference between those two bikes when I get on the X version of the SV. It's a very unique motorcycle because it's naked from the hips down and sport bike from the hips up.
The power on the Duck is really nice. I love the way the torque comes on these old air-cooled Ducati engines. It just feels really velvety, really smooth,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it has a lot of, it's very predictable, very linear, and it doesn't have that kind of like off-on light switch yank that a lot of Vtwins do.
Yeah, no, it's really smooth, yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting riding experience. I'm thinking from the perspective of a beginner, this bike is quite nice because, like you said, low down, it's really docile. You're not going to get into a ton of trouble with it. But if you want to rev it out a little bit, it actually has a really nice linear power band all the way to the top, I actually feel the Suzuki bottom end is a little bit more pokey and snatchy than this thing.
Yeah, it really does have a little bit more giddy up than the Ducati does. and just looking at them side by side, take a look at this. We've got this little frame triangle right here that goes up into this wider section.
I mean, yeah, it's like that meme where it's like, oh, copy it, but don't make it look too much like mine, you know?
Yep, it's so funny seeing them next to each other, and they're both the white bike.
Yeah. A lot of people like to say that the Suzuki is the better Ducati monster, but I don't know. I think the Duck is. I mean, I didn't think they'd feel so different to ride, but they really do. Let's jump back on and do a little side by side, so you can tell me a little bit what you feel about the Duck as well.
Yeah.
And it's a little unfair because this is a brand spanking new bike. It's super fresh, you know. So it's a little unfair, but the fundamentals are good to compare, you know.
Yeah, just immediately I notice that I'm sitting inside this bike, whereas I'm sitting on the Suzuki.
Yeah, the Suzuki is definitely much more of a kind of sport bike stance.
The shape of this tank is very muscly and very, you know, aggressive. It's I would say that this is really a Street Fighter. You know, it
Yes.
feels like it's got that Street Fighter stance. And, you know, I know people use that phrase a lot, but, you know, this feels like a brawler. It feels like a little muscly brawler kind of bike.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the SV felt a little bit more sport bikey, you know?
Yeah. And I think that's down to the fact that Japan just, I mean, they build sport bikes, you know? So I think Suzuki's sport bike heritage is always going to come through in all their bikes.
And I am loving the throttle feel on this Ducati.
It's so good, isn't it?
It's so good.
Yeah, I mean, the SV does suffer from a very slight snatch on the throttle. It's not bad, but the Dux is very nice. Even for a 2012 model, is really good.
Like, velvety is the perfect way to put it. It just is so smooth.
Now, again, like I said, the SV is a little bit more fresh, and so going through these corners, it does feel definitely nicer than the Duck, but
Yes.
I do think it's down to tires. You know, these are brand spanking new tires that are better than the Angel GTs, and it definitely shows. I can feel this bike just flicks in so much nicer than the Duck.
And I also think that part of that is where you're sitting on the motorcycle, because your ass is pretty low on this bike. However, I gotta give the transmission feel to Ducati as well, because the SV just feels like a typical Japanese kind of snick, go right into place, whereas the Ducati kind of clunks. It gives you that nice, very tactile feedback and lets you know when you're exactly in gear.
Yeah, I think between the clutch feel on the Duck and the clunk of the gearbox, it is quite nice, but like every Ducati gearbox I've ever encountered, neutral is just impossible to find for some reason, you know?
Yes.
Not a lot of vibration through this engine, but again, that's due to the fact that it's liquid cooled, a little bit tighter tolerance, just a little bit higher tune, and you can definitely sense that. I think the SV definitely likes going up in the revs more than the Duck, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think the Ducati is happiest between 4 and 9 grand, basically. Anything beyond that, and it's just, you know, it's like, you need to shift gears right now. Whereas you can basically rev the SV to the moon, and it'll be happy.
Yeah, the SV loves being revved out, and it's why you'll see a lot more track-prepped SV650s than track-prepped Ducati Monsters. I don't know of any track-prepped Ducati Monsters. Most Ducati Monster guys don't turn their bikes into track bikes. They go and buy a Panigale for that, because of course, why wouldn't you?
It also would be kind of a shame to chop up this bike because it looks so pretty.
It does.
It's such a pretty motorcycle.
They both have such distinctive low-end barks that are completely different. That's what I like about both of these bikes. Like, if I blip the throttle in the SV, it's just that it sounds like an SV650, where you blip the throttle in the Duck, it sounds like a Ducati, you know? It's so crazy. It's just like, it's so distinct and unique. Alrighty guys, after this on-the-road test, let's take these two bikes back to the shop and get our final opinions on, I guess, which one is best and who should get what.
Let's do it.
Alright, Spike, we spent the morning hanging out with the old Monster over here and then the Suzuki. What do you think?
Well, I thought originally they were going to be a lot more similar than they are. I thought that because Suzuki basically copied the Monster, and the Monster really hasn't changed all that much, that perhaps they would be very similar, but they're really not. The throttle feel on this is a little bit better down low than on the SV. The seating position, very different than on the SV. And that's not just down to the clip-ons either. That's just down to how this is kind of a very aggressive, muscular stance on this. Whereas even the fully, naked bike spec version of the SV is kind of very upright.
Yeah.
And I think that the engine on this is just so good.
Isn't it? Yeah,
so
air-cooled Ducati L-Twins are really special, yeah. And honestly, to your point, that big, fat, muscular tank on the Monster really does give it a very different vibe than this bike over here. And I gotta agree, the throttle on the Monster is really sweet. It's really nice, really well fueled, because it's more of a characterful, read old engine. It just feels a little bit more special. The Suzuki feels laser sharp, I will say, for a 645cc V-twin that isn't a super sport engine, that isn't super hopped up. This thing feels really pokey, really sharp, you know? So I think the Suzuki is definitely your buy if you're thinking about maybe doing a little bit of track days, getting into sporty riding. Even the naked version of the SV650 rides really nice and it's really flickable. The Monster to me, like you said, I think in one of our vlogs, or maybe it was off camera, is the quintessential just like street fighter, kind of muscly, like around the town kind of bike.
This is really rewarding to ride both in a very docile way, below 6,000 RPM, and then when you want to get it to go, it'll just go. And it's got a really good down low kind of bark and growl. It's a very good city bikes, twisty road, weekendy sort of experience. I don't necessarily think I would commute on this machine, mostly because there's not a lot of place to put anything, and it is very hot in traffic. Having that air-cooled engine does kind of suck if you're in stop and go. The SV650 is a little bit more of an everyday kind of ride to me.
Yeah, and that's a big reason why people choose the SV as that everyday ride. It's gonna be there, reliable, everyday, turn on and just go. And something like the Ducati, I don't know if we mentioned in our vlog, but I'll say it again, the entry point might not be that spicy. It's only a little bit more expensive for the new 797, and even this older one is a little cheaper, but really the long-term costs of Ducati ownership are definitely gonna hurt. Ask me how I know. I'm not looking forward to doing the Desmo valves on my desert sled, but I think we just pay for it because it just has that character. It's just a nice thing to own, And like we were saying, you tell someone at the office you got a Ducati, you just sound cooler than saying you got a Suzuki. I'm sorry, it's just true. It's just true.
It really is. There's so much panache about this motorcycle that doesn't have. And as a result, this is perhaps a little bit more just of a reliable purchase.
Yep.
It's a very known quantity, the SV650. But I feel like the main question then is, who should own which bike?
Yeah, and I think that's a very valid question. I think if you're a practical, budget-oriented, smart about your stuff, I think a used SV650 is never going to be a bad choice, no matter what kind of rider you are, no matter what your situation is. They are literally one of the best choices, why everyone recommends them. But I think if you want something with a little bit more fun factor, a little bit more effervescent quality, a little bit more character, maybe spending a little bit more down the road, the Monster's not a bad choice either. I mean, both of these bikes are very fun to ride.
Yes. Neither one's going to let you down, and I totally agree that this is perhaps for someone who's a little bit more on a budget, but still wants all of that V-twin character, but perhaps doesn't want, to have to deal with thousands of dollars worth of Desmo valve service.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a lot to be said for this bike being very fun and very unique, but on the day-to-day, I would really rather have the SV650, honestly.
I think I would too, but the elephant in the room is that this is a 2012 model bike, so book value on this is about $4 grand, $4,500, and that's a very nice experience for that little amount of money.
Oh, absolutely. If you can find yourself, this is actually a pretty good example of a Ducati Monster.
It's in really good condition.
The only thing that I would say is our tires back here is a little squared off, but that happens to every bike.
Consumables.
So, I mean, if you can score one of these bikes for $4.5 grand, you really should do it.
Yeah.
Because it's just that good.
Yeah, they're pretty sweet. So, thanks for watching. We'll catch you next time. Let us know which one of these bikes you like most down in the comments. We'll see you later. Well, howdy, partner. How's it going? Now this video's over, but I'll tell you what, you click on this one right over here, you can keep watching yourself some Yammie Noob. And if y'all didn't know, we're based out of Austin, Texas, so click on that video, you might check out something cool.